Satanic and pagan symbolism is everywhere. Today I'll be exploring the secret meanings of certain crosses, one particular musical note that was banned by the Church, and the truth about the Vatican's evil agenda. The evil chord banned by the Church. If there's one thing the Catholic Church cannot stand, it's the devil. And if there's one other thing the Catholic Church cannot stand, it's the latest music. So what happens when you combine the devil and the sort of harmony that gets your hips moving? You get banishment. In this case, banishment of the diabolus in musica. During the Renaissance in Europe between the 14th and 17th centuries, music wasn't about expression or emotion, especially not in Italy where the Church ruled supreme. Music was about praising the Lord. Almost all new music was created specifically for acts of worship, and for that reason new musical compositions needed to be in accordance with the Renaissance view of God. All music associated with God thereby needed to be beautiful. It's not clear precisely how it happened, but somebody high up in the Church decided that they didn't like a single musical chord located between the augmented fourth and diminished fifth. It struck a chord with them, pun totally intended, and they banished it from the face of the earth. The chord of evil spans 3 steps on the musical scale. The Catholics weren't wrong. It is an ugly note. It's not bad by any means, but it is considered to be a very dissonant harmony. If you want to hear the chord for yourself, go ahead and play Black Sabbath on the band's self-titled debut album. Guitarist Tony Iommi said that he liked the note because on guitar it gives off an unsettling feeling. It was this unsettling feeling that got the chord banned, but there was a bit more to it than just somebody being upset. There was rhyme and reason behind the Church's banishment of the chord. It makes a surprising amount of sense too. Because music needed to reflect God, and because God had created everything, God had created the unpleasant chord. So the higher-ups within the Church concluded that the devil had corrupted the chord. God had made it beautiful, and the devil ruined it. Therefore, anyone who played the chord was playing Satan's music. Why did Pope Francis wield a sorcerer's staff? In 2018, Pope Francis was spotted wielding a forked bamboo staff that looked suspiciously like an evil sorcerer's staff. Could this be additional proof that the Pope is a demon and the Roman Catholic Church is a secret satanic organization? Maybe I jumped the gun there, or maybe not. More will be coming up on the bizarre satanic practices of the Church later in the video. For now, I want to focus on the weird stuff. It was carried by Pope Francis on October 3rd during the opening Mass of the Synod of Bishops. The event is a sort of global meeting of Catholic bishops, led by the Pope himself. The surprise came when instead of holding up a symbol of the Church during Mass, the Pope wielded a staff as if he were going to cast a level 3 fireball spell. The staff is known as a stang, something with deep ties to occultism. It was supposedly given to the Pope by 2 young women at a youth rally in Rome about 2 months earlier. The young women had asked the Pope if he would hold the staff during the upcoming Mass at the Synod of Bishops, which he agreed to happily. In photographs taken on that day, you can see one of the young women with a red string bracelet. Such bracelets are often talismans worn by a variety of anti-Christian practitioners, including practitioners of witchcraft, the Kabbalah, Wicca, and Talmudic Judaism. Stangs have appeared throughout the centuries, almost always as things of evil and magic. This kind of staff is considered a witch's ceremonial tool, always forked and oftentimes with an iron nail driven through it. The iron nail is said to be a mockery of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Christians believe the stang signifies the power of Satan. In this day and age, such tools are often used by traditional witches practicing at home. Sometimes it can represent the horned one, aka the devil. Other times it's nothing but a symbolic instrument with its power rooted in nature rather than anything Christian. Whatever the case, evil, wicked, or just a tool of Wicca witches, there's no escaping the fact that Pope Francis still held the staff up at one of the biggest meetings of bishops in the world. This isn't the only time Pope Francis has come under fire for holding up strange-looking things. He has a history of brandishing bizarre crosses. For example, the communist cross, which is weird even by Satanist standards. It's a wooden hammer and sickle with Christ on the hammer, his arms lifted to either side of it as if he were on a cross. The Pope even wielded a yin-yang cross with a little heart on it and some fish. Do you think Pope Francis is progressive, or is there something more nefarious going on? Let me know down below. And before we move on to number 11, I need to give a big shout out to Thyronal and Edwin Pina for your continued support and kind words. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and become part of the Origins Explained family. The Scholomance, Transylvania's school of black magic. Deep in the spookiest realm on Earth, there is said to be an underground school that's the antithesis of Hogwarts. Instead of students coming to this place to learn magic and be contributing members of the wizarding world, students go to the Scholomance to learn the dark arts of black magic and necromancy. And who runs the classes? You guessed it, the devil himself. This is all according to the folklore of Romania, with the stories going back hundreds of years. The school, hidden where no outsiders can find it in the dreaded Transylvania, only enrolls a handful of students each semester, so that there are no more than 10 at once. These 10 students are destined to become Solomonari. Solomonari is the Romanian word for a very peculiar type of wizard. A wizard who rides a dragon, controls the weather, and brings down storms from the black skies. To become this horrible sorcerer, students must remain within the Scholomance for 7 years. They cannot be exposed to the sunlight during their time in the school. It's no wonder wizards are always so pale and vampire-like in the movies. They have no vitamin D and come from Transylvania. I don't have any proof that the Scholomance is a real place, or that it truly teaches dark magic. It only appears in legends. But then it started popping up in literature at the start of the 19th century. One of the earliest written records of the school came from Emily Gerard in her article Transylvanian Superstitions, published in 1885. Many believe that the article was read by Bram Stoker, the grandfather of vampires himself, which he likely used as inspiration for his novel Dracula. Let's say, just for fun, that the Scholomance is a real place. The Vatican is the base of good and light, while the Scholomance is the hub of all things evil. And wouldn't you like to know what the legends say the pupils do for their studies? The curriculum involves learning the language of all living things. Students must also learn the secrets of nature and magic. Pupils are instructed on how to properly cast magic spells. They must know how to control the rain. And of course, they take dragon riding lessons. What do you think? Could you hack it at the Devil's School for Sorcerers? The Templars were secret worshippers of this dark god. There's a secret that has been kept under wraps since the 14th century, a secret so terrible and so world-shattering that you're probably not going to believe it. I don't even know if I believe it, yet the facts speak for themselves. Baphomet, the demonic entity and mascot for Satanism, was worshipped by the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were supposed to be an order of good, justice, and righteousness. They were the Jedi of the Middle Ages, yet in the autumn of 1307, the Church lashed out at the Templars. With help from King Philippe IV of France, the Templars were arrested and charged with blasphemy. There were wild accusations thrown against the Knights Templar. It was said that they denounced the name of Christ, spat on the crucifix, and worshipped false idols. One of those false idols was Baphomet, the most heinous version of Satan ever devised. The Knights Templar refused to confess, so many of them were burned alive as heretics in May of 1310, 54 Templars to be precise. Later in 1312, the order came to an end when the master of the temple, James of Malay, and his colleague Geoffrey of Charnay were killed as well. In the 700 years since the Holy Order was abolished, there have been a lot of rumors about what really happened to them. History tells us that the order was founded in 1119 as a military escort service to keep Christian pilgrims safe as they made journeys into the Holy Land. They grew strong, multiplied, and started seizing power across Europe. They had a network of around 870 houses, castles, and banks. Their power is an important aspect to the story because one of the most popular theories today is that they weren't heretics at all. Instead, King Philippe IV owed them a lot of money and was threatened by their power, so he had the knights arrested and tried as blasphemers. If true, it would mean the knights were framed as worshippers of diabolical gods, specifically Baphomet. But who is Baphomet anyway? I can tell you one thing, he's nowhere in the Bible. The devilish deity came out of nowhere. I'll leave you in suspense for now, but there's more on that coming up very soon in the video. Satan, Jesus, Egypt, and the Ankh. Take a look at the Ankh and compare it to the cross. Do you notice anything strange? They are essentially the same symbol, only the Ankh has a loop at the top. The Ankh is also significantly older than the Christian cross. And both have a connection to Satanism that you really need to know about. I want to start with the Ankh and its ancient origins. The Egyptians called it the Key of Life or the Cross of Life. Earliest examples of it date back 5,150 years. It's always been the same, a simple cross with a loop. So what's the deal with the loop? It's all about the circle of life. Egyptians believed that death was only the beginning. They thought life went on forever, starting with mortal existence and continuing indefinitely through the afterlife. The Ankh is the hieroglyphic symbol for the word life. Egyptian gods were painted in tombs carrying the Ankh. This thing is everywhere in Egyptian ruins, from temples to pyramids. Then in the 4th century AD, it started to appear in the Coptic Christian community. It changed from being an ancient symbol of eternal life to being a symbol of Christ's promise of everlasting life. And here's a weird fact the church doesn't talk about. Early Christians in Rome, the center of the church's domain, didn't use the cross as a sign of their faith. For them, the cross was a morbid symbol. Remember that the cross was a form of execution, even if it was associated with Jesus. It would be like if you wore an amulet depicting a lethal injection around your neck. Christians in Rome used the fish, an ancient pagan symbol for fertility, to show their devotion to Jesus. It's another amazing example of how closely related to paganism early Christianity was. Even the symbols were the same. Throughout the first 3,000 years of Egyptian history, the Ankh was most closely associated with the cult of Osiris, the Egyptian god of the dead. Coincidentally, Osiris' story was all about resurrection and rebirth, just like Jesus' story. So it was fitting that his Ankh would be transformed into Christ's cross. But what about the devil? In modern times, the Ankh has been linked with paganism and Satanism. It's sometimes used as a talisman in ceremonial magic and occultism. Peace for Satan. The truth of the peace sign is going to make you gasp. It might even make you run outside to your driveway and rip that peace sticker right off your bumper. Many people believe that the peace sign is actually an anti-Christian symbol, a symbol known as the Nero cross. The peace sign is a circle with a vertical line through its center. Branching off from the line are 2 more lines, creating little pi triangles. It's been said that the lines are a broken cross, not just an upside-down cross, but an inverted cross that's been broken to symbolize the power of Satan. Frightening, right? It would be if it were true, but it's not. The peace sign was designed by a guy named Gerald Holtham in 1958, and it has a very clear history. The next time you hear somebody try to denounce the peace symbol as a satanic sign, you can tell them this. During the British campaign for nuclear disarmament, Holtham went about developing a symbol that could be seen as the universal sign of peace. The vertical line in the center represents the flag semaphore signal for the letter D. The semaphore flagging system is a way to convey letters and words by waving flags. The downward lines on either side represent the letter N. Together, you get nuclear disarmament. The peace symbol is perfectly safe to use, even if it does sometimes get mixed up with Satanism. The Templars and their Dark Lord Baphomet. Now let's get back to the Templars and their devil worship. I left off just before revealing the truth of Baphomet, and I won't keep you waiting any longer. We've all seen pictures of Baphomet and can recognize him immediately. He's the poster child for Satanism, after all. You probably remember earlier this year when a man destroyed the statue of Baphomet at the Iowa Capitol. These days, Baphomet is a synonym for Satan, but 1,000 years ago, the very first reference of him appeared in a letter written by a French crusader in 1098. The crusader claimed that in the Holy Land, Muslims called upon a creature named Baphomet before they went into battle. It was like Vikings screaming Valhalla before charging into an epic fight. Most scholars agree this was a corruption or misspelling of Muhammad, the prophet who founded Islam in the 7th century. Christians perceived Islam as the worship of Muhammad, not Allah. This was the same in the eyes of medieval Christians as worshipping the devil. Baphomet became Baphomet and eventually became a version of Satan. But in reality, it was likely a misunderstanding, and there was never a deity named Baphomet. His whole existence is nothing but a medieval typo. Or is it? History can be tricky. Nobody knows that better than those of you who frequent the channel. There is a possibility that Baphomet had nothing to do with Muhammad. The Templars could have really been heretics. Maybe not Satanists, but they could have secretly been Gnostics. Gnostics were extremely popular in the first few centuries after the death of Christ, but as the Roman Church gained power, most Gnostic religious sects were destroyed. They had some weird beliefs, like that the material reality of the universe was corrupt. They believed the God of the Old Testament was an evil force and that Jesus Christ was a sort of energy ghost. Gnostic beliefs can get really confusing, plus there were hundreds of them with their own unique twists. It's known that the Templars were secretive and sneaky. They gathered in strange underground chambers to hold covert meetings. Nobody knows what happened in those meetings or what strange initiation ceremonies they held, but it's possible they were still practicing a version of Gnosticism that focused on worshipping a forgotten god named Baphomet. St. Andrew's Cross. The Scottish flag is probably not something you think about very often, especially not when it comes to Satan. But take a look at the Scottish flag and tell me, what do you see? A big white X against a blue background, right? But is that an X or a cross shaped like an X? The history of the Scottish flag is bloody, brutal, and full of surprises. The man you see here is St. Andrew, carved of oak. The picture was taken from the Kingdom of Scots Gallery at the National Museum of Scotland. Andrew is dressed in long robes, carrying a great big cross in his left hand and holding his books in his right hand. It was probably carved around 1500 AD. Andrew was the brother of Peter, both of whom were disciples of Jesus Christ. They were in his cozy group of 12 and both met horrendous ends. Andrew was distinguished from the other apostles in that he was also a disciple of St. John the Baptist. You know, before he became St. John the Headless. Little is known about Andrew's early life. After Jesus died, Peter became the first pope of the church and met his end in Rome. Peter was crucified upside down, making the inverted cross one of the first great holy symbols of Christianity. Yes, the upside-down cross is a holy sign connected to Saint Peter, Pope numero uno. It was only recently that the inverted cross became a symbol of evil and the devil. Andrew also met his end upon the cross. He was crucified on what's called a saltire, or an X-shaped cross. And just like his brother Peter, Andrew didn't see himself as worthy of dying in the same way as his Lord Jesus Christ. So he was nailed to an X-shaped cross. Every year on November 30th, the martyrdom of St. Andrew is celebrated around the world. Many pilgrims make their way to the city of St. Andrews in Scotland, formerly called Fife. The weird part is that nobody really knows why the Scots adopted Andrew as their patron saint. He died in the Greek city of Patras, far away from Scotland. One legend is that a monk in the 4th century was approached by an angel. The angel told the monk named Saint Regulus to bring Andrew's bones from their resting place in Constantinople to Fife. He did, and later a cathedral was built on the very spot. As for the Satan connection, it's a little less obvious than the inverted cross of St. Peter, which should be holy but is definitely used as a satanic symbol. The X appears now and again in relation to unholy things, but the truth is that most people don't even know what it is. The Roman cult of Satan. There are so many heretical symbols that can be found in just about every church across the country. It's quite frankly astonishing. It's why more and more Christians are starting to believe that the Roman Catholic Church is secretly a satanic cult, and you might too by the end of this video. I'm going to be talking about a whole heap of symbols right now, starting with the Chi-Rho. It's a symbol you can see in plenty of churches. It looks like a P with a long line cutting straight through the center of an X-shaped cross. It's also known as Constantine's cross and is supposedly the monogram of Christ. Legend has it that Roman Emperor Constantine used the symbol after converting the Roman Empire to an officially Christian nation. He apparently saw it in a dream, so he turned it into the battle standard of his army. However, its original meaning is much different. The Chi-Rho was a symbol of the god of time, Kronos. It was also an emblem associated with pagan solar deities. It may have been taken from the Ankh, which I told you about earlier. The Celtic cross is another one you can see for yourself in plenty of modern churches. It's a cross but has a circle around it. It's typically meant as a representation of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The Celtic cross is far older than Jesus. It's also called the Ionic cross, with its roots going back 6,000 years. Nobody knows quite what it was used for, only that it was a symbol of the Celtic people long before Christianity. It may have been an early symbol of the Gallic sun god Tyrannus. It only became a Christian symbol after the Celtic people were converted and Saint Columba traveled to Ireland. One of the most controversial symbols is the Jesus fish. It has a bizarre history and has meant a lot of different things over the years. These days it's a symbol of Jesus, but thousands of years ago it was used by the pagans. The Jesus fish was associated with the goddess Venus and was meant to represent female genitalia. You can even see examples of the baby Jesus within early versions of the symbol in ancient works of art. Before it was a fish, it symbolized the womb of the Virgin Mary. It slowly evolved from being associated with Venus to being Mary's actual womb. Even though it did change, the Jesus fish still symbolized the same thing. It was all about birth, a woman's ability to give life and fertility. Nowadays, people slap Jesus fish magnets on their fridges and cars. Are these symbols proof of satanic work happening inside the church? Or are these symbols proof of how much paganism went into building the Christian faith? There are other symbols I just don't have time to mention, like the Eye of Horus, the Masonic Pyramid, the SPQR symbol, and the Madonna Lily. But don't worry, I'll be doing more videos, so be sure to check back soon. Santa Muerte, a mix of Satanism, Catholicism, and ancient Aztec beliefs. One of the fastest growing folk religions in the world, has been denounced as pure Satanism by Catholic priests. It's the newest religious sect with mass appeal sweeping the globe. After starting in Mexico, the cult of Santa Muerte has become an international sensation. Santa Muerte has a reputation for being a death cult, with its primary members being drug traffickers, murderers, and criminals. In rundown areas of Guadalajara and Mexico City, there are small temples dedicated to Santa Muerte. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be anything satanic about them. If you speak a bit of Spanish, you probably already know that Santa Muerte means Saint Death. Although her followers also call her the Bony Lady because, well, she's kind of the Grim Reaper. Catholic priests have denounced all worship of Santa Muerte as Satan worship. It's frightening Christians around the world because millions of people are allegedly performing satanic mass. There are an estimated 12 million followers of Santa Muerte around the world, but it could be even more. Mr. Santana, whose name sounds suspiciously like Satan, said ritual worship of Santa Muerte is not the Black Mass. Mr. Santana is the one who gives Mass at the Santa Muerte Temple in Guadalajara, so he would know. He said that the service isn't evil in the slightest, and neither is Santa Muerte. Saint Death, in Santana's own words, is simply fulfilling God's orders. She gives people what they want, and when they finish their life on earth, she comes to claim their souls. But there's so much more going on here than just a new saint. Santa Muerte has a lot in common with an ancient Aztec goddess. Before the 16th century, the Aztecs celebrated a festival of death every year in August. The deity most closely connected to the celebration was Mictlantecuhtli, a goddess of death. Then, when the Spanish arrived, they tried to shift the Aztec traditions to be more like their Catholic traditions. The Spanish encouraged the conquered Aztec to honor their dead on All Souls Day. This became the modern celebration of the Day of the Dead, which is an incredible fusion of Aztec tradition and Spanish Catholicism. Over the last decade or so, Santa Muerte has taken a more prominent role in Day of the Dead festivities, and now locals are starting to recognize her as the reincarnation of Mictlantecuhtli. This is an Aztec goddess being brought back from extinction, but not according to Christians, who say this is all the work of the devil. The Vatican has been extremely outspoken about Santa Muerte. They've condemned the new religion. Catholic bishops throughout the US have expressed concern over the increasing popularity of Santa Muerte. She has caused a massive panic within the church. But is this Satan trying to win souls like the church says? Or is Santa Muerte the first step in the old Aztec gods reappearing after 500 years? Could we see the rebirth of old gods in our lifetime? Let me know what you think in the comments. The Vatican's very weird magic Pinecone. The Fontana della Pina in the Vatican is a water fountain. Translated into English, it's the Fountain of the Pinecone. It's named after the humongous bronze pine cone that was originally at the center of a Roman fountain in the 1st century AD. Welcome to the weird obsession the Vatican has with pine cones. If it was only the fountain, I wouldn't be telling you about this. One pine cone wouldn't be considered unusual, but when you look around, you start to notice a little too many pine cones. There's one on the Pope's staff. His hat is kind of shaped like a pine cone. The pine cone is on the coat of arms of the Holy See and the Vatican flag. Okay, so the church is obsessed with pine cones. What's the big deal? The big deal is that for centuries pine cones have been symbols of magic. They've been associated with the ancient god Baal, pagan rituals, fertility goddesses, and the third eye. The third eye is the most intriguing aspect of the pinecone. When you say third eye to someone, they probably think about astral projection and clairvoyance. But the truth is that there is a real third eye in your body. It's called the pineal gland, situated at the geometric center of the human brain. It's linked to your body's perception of light and is believed to regulate sleep patterns, but it also does other stuff that scientists don't even know about. It's a huge mystery because the tiny gland, which is shaped exactly like a pine cone, receives far more blood flow than nearly any other part of the body except the kidneys. The tiny gland has been a sacred thing throughout history. Somehow, almost every ancient civilization understood the importance of the pineal gland and connected it to the pine cone. 3,200 years ago, the Egyptian staff of Osiris depicted two intertwining serpents with a pine cone at the top. This was almost identical to the Indian Kundalini. Kundalini is a spiritual energy that's depicted as two serpents coiling up the base of the human spine to the pineal gland at the moment of enlightenment. Hindu gods were frequently depicted in artwork holding out a pine cone in an outstretched hand. So were the Anunnaki gods of the ancient Sumerians. And so was Chicomecoatl, the Aztec goddess of agriculture, depicted as a snake holding a pine cone. The Romans associated pine cones with Venus, the goddess of love. The Celts associated pine cones with regeneration and fertility. They'd even put them under their pillow at night to help them conceive. Across the ancient world, in almost every civilization, pine cones were associated with snakes, fertility, enlightenment, and cosmic wisdom. This is despite the fact that many of the civilizations never met one another. They all came to the same conclusion on their own. Pine cones look like the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is extremely important. You would think that the Vatican, a place so against pagan gods and symbolism, would stop putting pine cones on everything. The Pope has an actual staff that looks nearly identical to the Egyptian staff of Osiris. You already saw earlier in the video how the Pope was using a stang, which is basically a wizard's staff. So what does all this mean? Not so scary pentagram. The most evil symbol in the world is definitely the pentagram. When you see a pentagram, and especially an inverted pentagram, the first thing that comes to mind is a satanic ritual. You likely imagine someone standing in the center of a chalk-drawn pentagram who's trying to summon the forces of darkness. But did you know that this dark symbol has its roots in holiness? Going even further back in time, the pentagram was used in Japanese religion to symbolize the 5 elements of life. It was a magic symbol for the Japanese and for the Chinese as well. Even in Babylonian culture before the invention of Judaism, the pentagram was a symbol of the Anunnaki gods. It was only recently that the pentagram became scary. Early Christian symbolism had the pentagram being a sign of Christ. It was originally used by Christians to represent the 5 wounds Jesus suffered during the crucifixion. It was used before the cross because, as you learned earlier, the cross wasn't originally holy. When the cross did grow in popularity, it replaced the pentagram. It lost its importance for years, making a comeback in the 1800s. The pentagram started to be seen as a symbol of evil and black magic. The stigma stuck, and now it's unlikely that the pentagram will ever be a holy symbol of Jesus again. What is Satanism anyway? Speaking of the pentagram, it's the official symbol of the Church of Satan. The inverted pentagram with Baphomet first appeared in 1968. Then it was printed on the cover of the Satanic Bible the next year. But just what is Satanism? It all starts with the man himself. The big bad guy, Satan. Satan first appeared thousands of years before Christianity as the figure Ankh knew in Zoroastrianism. He was later portrayed as an evil entity in Jewish Kabbalism. In the Bible, Satan was an accusing angel featured in the book of Job. In the book of Enoch, Satan was a fallen angel. Satan has undergone more changes than nearly any other figure in history. He's been around for thousands of years and has been worshipped under many names. In the 14th century, people started viewing Satan as an anti-hero. He was still a monster, but the Romantics cast him in a more admirable light. He became a rebel who defied the authority of God. Even though Christianity reigned supreme, people liked the idea of rebellion behind closed doors. In the 19th century, William Blake illustrated Paradise Lost and presented Satan as a sort of messiah. Theologians started thinking of Satan more as an anarchist than an actual antichrist. Aleister Crowley, at the beginning of the 20th century, celebrated the devil as the greatest rebel who ever lived. Crowley, as despicable as he was, shot Satanism into the mainstream. 60 years ago, Anton LaVey was a carnival worker taking night classes on the occult. He would be the one to form the modern Church of Satan in April of 1966. He became the first black pope and the father of the real Satanist religion that has its own statue at the Iowa Capitol. What do you think of Satanism? Is it really as bad as everyone thinks? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.